Heart at number 31. Welcome back to the countdown with Dean Kirk. Who will you run to? Up 9 from number 40 on this fancy playlist of August 29th, 1987. The album was called Bad Animals, 9th album by Heart. This record, by the way, would be their 8th top 10 U.S. single, top 10 hit here in the States. Went to number 7 on Billboard's Hot 100. Didn't do as well in England, though. Just made top 30 over in the UK, but still, Heart made a rousing comeback in the mid-'80s. I'll get to it in just a minute. Heart is one of those bands that I appreciate a lot more now than back in the day when they first became popular. Maybe it's because I'm more of a child of the 60s and early 70s, and Heart didn't have their first hit until 1976. Spring of 1976, they came out with Crazy for You. And actually, even though that song was played a lot on the radio, if I remember correctly, it only got as high as 35 or 36. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to double check on Billboard. That was quite amazing that it didn't do that well. Just barely cracked the top 40, even though it was played, massive airplay on radio. And then there was Magic Man, the summer of 1976, Barracuda in 1977, Straight On in 1978, and the lovely Dog and the Butterfly in late 78, early 79. I remember they had a song called Even It Up in 1980, but it wasn't a very big hit for them. As a matter of fact, they hit a lull of sorts in the early 80s. They just kind of went on the skids in the early 80s. Although actually my favorite song by Heart came out in that era back in 1982 when they came out with This Man Is Mine. Ann Wilson laying down the smack on that record, but she does so in sort of an easygoing, sort of aggressive but easygoing style on that record. Ann Wilson, she's an absolutely phenomenal vocalist. She reminds me a little bit of Grace Slick. Who Will You Run To by Heart. Now, let's go back to 1985. This is when they made their big comeback. The album was called Heart, by the way. They teamed up with a rock and roll producer, one of the top rock producers of the 1980s, Ron Nevison. Rock and roll embedded in his DNA big time. You see, he started out as an engineer. He worked on Quadrophenia by The Who back in 1973. Boy, they had two phenomenal songs off that album. I remember Love Reign Over Me in the fall of 73, and then Can You See the Real Me, Doctor? I believe was the name of that record in 74. But he worked on that album, Ron Nevison did. He worked on Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin. He was an engineer on that album. And, of course, you remember the iconic Kashmir off that album. Boogie with Stu was another fantastic cut off that album, too. Had a sort of a 50s sound to it. He's worked with Babies. He worked with the Babies, and he's worked with the Jefferson Starship, and, Survivor. He produced the song Vital Signs by Survivor. Had that hit off couple of hits off that album. I Can't Hold Back and High on You. Bottom line is the major talent. We are talking about on this album. Well, I'm running ahead of myself. I got to calm down. I'm running ahead of myself again. Well, anyway, here's the deal about this Heart. They came out with What About Love in the summer of 1985, and they roared back in live. They really did. It's kind of like this. Your car breaks down, your engine starts sputtering, and then boom! And that's what happened with Heart. What About Love in the summer of 1985, followed by Never. And these dreams, a ballad by them. That's the thing about them. They could rock, and they could do these ballads, these slow, peaceful, placid songs like These Dreams, which bordered on dream pop, that record, and then the pop, Nothing at All. I love that record. Really do appreciate these songs now more than I did at the time. The album in 1987 was called Bad Animals, their 9th album. I believe I already mentioned that. Once again, produced by Ron Nevison. Now, this is where the constellation of talents really come to play big time. Now, on the one hand, you got Ann and Nancy Wilson of Heart and the band Heart. You got Ron Nevison, the producer, the rock and roll engineer. He's worked with the legends, the Who, Babies, Jefferson Starship, Survivor, and this record, Who Will You Run To, written by Diane Warren. Diane Warren, one of the most prolific songwriters of the 80s and 90s. I've said this so many times on these videos, I'll say it again. Books need to be written about these people behind the scenes who help make these hits, like Ron Nevison in this case, and Diane Warren, a songwriter. Now, most casual listeners probably never heard of Diane Warren, but if you're in the business, if you're in the songwriting business, in the music business, in some capacity, no doubt Diane Warren is sort of a marquee name. Diane Warren, her big success. Now, she was rejected a lot, her songwriting rejected a lot before she had her first hit. First song that she had that was a hit was Solitaire by Laura Branigan. That was in the winter of 82 and 83. That was a runner-up to Gloria. Diane Warren had written a number of songs for Celine Dion, including If You Ask Me To. She wrote Blame It on the Rain. Yes, you remember that one by Milli Vanilli. She wrote that one, and Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. She co-wrote that with, if I remember correctly, Albert Hammond. And she wrote When I See You Smile by Bad English, another big success story for Diane Warren. She wrote the song Rhythm of the Night by DeBarge, one of those iconic R&B dance hits back in the mid-'80s. She wrote that one, just to give you a smattering of her songwriting talent. Her heyday back in the 80s and back in the 90s as well, although more recently, maybe about 10 years ago, I think, she had written a song for Lady Gaga. But so we got Diane Warren, we got Heart, and we got Ron Nevison producing this album. So the leadoff single was Alone. Who Will You Run To? And There's the Girl that came out in the winter of 1987, 88. There is a urban. I don't know. When I researched this record, when I researched a little bit on Heart, I came across this factoid. It may be a urban myth. When she was a lot younger, Ann Wilson, she worked for a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and she was let go. And when Heart got really big, Ann Wilson she thought about sending a platinum record, a copy of a platinum record to Colonel Sanders himself as sort of a thank you for letting her go, because if she wasn't fired or let go from Kentucky Fried Chicken, she wouldn't have formed the band Heart. Ann and Nancy Wilson of Heart. I got to tell you about Nancy Wilson. I want to go back to 1976 when they did Crazy For You, that guitar intro. She's shown there, Nancy Wilson, very confident, just playing that guitar, and that guitar intro, very reminiscent, sort of a reworking of the Moody Blues Question. You remember how the song by the Moody Blues Question started out with that guitar, that amazing, that scintillating guitar intro, and boy, Ann Wilson, she really nailed it there. There's one other thing I want to mention about Heart real quick. That really came to my attention. A Facebook friend of mine, he posted a video. It came up on my Facebook wall. Heart, behind the scenes. They were on tour. Behind the scenes on tour back in 1977. And this was when Barracuda came out, I believe, as a single. They had about 2 or 3 hit records under their belt by then. And they were backstage. And they were going back. This is great. Ann and Nancy Wilson and one of the group members, one of the fellows, they were going back to 1963. They were singing some hit records from 1963. I Will Follow Him by Lil Peggy March. And they did Essex, Easier Said Than Done. And Ann Wilson, she played. No, it was Nancy Wilson. She played. She nailed one of the guitar playing on one of those old songs. But it just amazed me that they went back to 1963, because I Will Follow Him and Easier Said Than Done sort of complete opposites from hard rocking classics like Barracuda. But Ann Wilson, she was singing I Love Him, like little Peggy March. It struck out at me because she did it with such feeling. And she went into a little bit of trivia about little Peggy March, which really just, oh man, that really amazed me. Very attractive. These two women, very attractive, very intelligent, very talented women. What a composite. What a package right there. Ann Wilson, as far as her vocals is concerned, she can thunder. Singer belted out in Barracuda, the sarcasm, and then she could sound foreboding, even a little bit desperate in something like Crazy for You. She could convey that, and yet she could purr through Dreamboat. Was it Dreamboat Annie? I believe was it the... yeah, it was Dreamboat Annie back in the winter of 76, 77. It was a slow, easygoing record. And she's just a very versatile vocalist, Ann Wilson. And from what I understand, when she did Stairway to Heaven as a tribute to Led Zeppelin, to Robert Plant, she nailed the thing. And as a matter of fact, Robert Plant himself, he said that Ann Wilson, she slayed it. So here we are. Just went all over the place on this record, the memories and everything. Just very impressed with that backstage video that my Facebook shared with me when they were on tour back in 1977. I just, whoo, my goodness. Well, we got hard at number 31 on my fantasy playlist, August 29th, 1987.